Hi, this is May.
And I'm Joy.
Welcome to the QWERTY Writing Life Podcast, where we have candid chats about our creative lives.
May and I are friends, writers, and creatives who want to share our endeavors out loud.
On this podcast, we're here to encourage each other, and you too,
and share tools we've discovered or made up.
So you can follow your passions with a little support. So grab your tea
or your coffee,
and let's get started. Hello everyone, it is another week and we are so excited to be here with you today. It is an interview episode and it's our first writer on the show and we went big with this one. Joy had the moxie to email Miss Joanna Penn and she said yes to being a guest on our podcast. So thank you, Joanna, so excited. Joy's going to give us a bio and then we'll dive right into the questions.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. Joanna Penn is an award-nominated New York Times and USA Today best-selling author of thrillers under J.F. Penn and also writes nonfiction for authors. She's an award-winning entrepreneur, podcaster, and YouTuber. Her site, The Creative Penn, with a double N.com, has been voted in the top 100 sites for writers by Writer's Digest. And Joanna has been a huge influence in our lives. We greatly admire you. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Oh, thanks for having me on. I'm always happy to come on the show.
So very excited. We have listened to probably most of your episodes on your Creative Penn podcast. We've read your books. We've been on your website. So thank you so much, first of all, for being just an influencer in this platform. And
oh, well, thank you. And, I've just been doing this for longer than you guys. So, my podcast has been going over a decade. And anyone who's listened to lots of episodes, I'm impressed with. So thank you very much for being in my audience.
Well, wonderful.
We always learn something. I love it. Our topic for this interview was the evolution of creativity, because Joanna has been doing this for a little while, and so she has a lot of experience with being a creative. So that's kind of where our questions drive from. Will you share with us some of your experiences along your creative path, kind of like mile markers of change, maybe, where you've seen the way that you create has evolved, or maybe you've grown confidence along the way?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll start by saying that although my family, like my dad is an artist, visual artist, and I grew up thinking that I wasn't creative, that I was the brainy one. I went to university. Not the rest of them are brainy, but I thought I'd do well at exams, rather than anything creative. So I didn't think of myself as creative, and I got a job within the consulting world after university, and in the end, I spent my time writing documents, but for programmers. So I did a lot of technical writing. I was in this corporate world. I call it the golden handcuffs period, when they pay you really well, but you're doing work that was not very creative. And I specialized in implementing accounts payable systems into corporates. I mean, you can't imagine much, less creative than that. But you do what you do, you pay off your student debt. Hopefully, I know it's better in England than America. But you do the things you have to do, and then you hit 30, 32-ish, and you go, what am I doing with my life? I'm just working the job, paying the bills. I bought a house, we had a mortgage. I was like, seriously, is this it? And when I looked at and I got to the point where I was just miserable at work, and first world problems. Obviously I was paid well and everything was good. I had a good marriage and a good job, but I was just miserable, and I got to the point of kind of crying at work most days, just going, what is the point? And especially in the IT world, because everything you do gets overwritten by another program. I mean, you just have to log into Skype and it overwrites with a new edition. And that was basically everything I did disappeared. And that was the moment where I was like, what am I missing? And I started to look at, okay, so what do I love? I love books. I've always been a reader, and I love travel. And I wrote down, I want to read and write books. That's what I want to do. And I want to travel. This would be my perfect life. And so identifying that, I then started to kind of think about creativity. And this was really seriously like the first time in my life, I'd really thought, okay, if I want to be a writer, then I guess I need to be creative in some way. How do you do that? So by now, this was sort of 2005-ish. I was living in Australia, and one of the things I've always liked doing is going to modern art museums and galleries. And I remember going to a gallery in Brisbane in Australia, and we went into this, it was one of those interactive exhibitions, and you got to colour with colouring pencils. And I sat down and I was colouring. I was like, oh my goodness, I haven't coloured something since I was a kid, and this is really, really fun. And so that's the moment, coming back to your question, I was thinking about it, that's the moment when I realized I was having fun. And sure, I was just coloring in some random picture in an art gallery, but it made me think, this is what I'm missing, some kind of fun, creative, look, I made this. And this idea of I made this, and on the video, you can see some of my books. This is the wonderful thing about being a writer. You can go, I made this, and I have something to show for my time. And so I guess that was a really big turning point for me in terms of creativity.
That makes perfect sense. And I love that you have that story that you can share, because there are so many others like you were stuck in a job that it just wasn't fulfilling, and it's because we desire that creativity. We've talked about that before on here. I know May's talked a lot about that.
Yeah, and I think if we didn't have that dichotomy, though, if you had not had that IT experience and the covering up of who you are and what you do, then maybe you would have never made it to that museum, and maybe you would have never colored, or maybe at some point in time you might have even actually written books, but not appreciated it in the way that you have. So the dichotomy. I try not to regret things in life.
Oh, and I don't regret it at all. And I'll add here, I know this is about creativity, but to be a successful creative, you need to be in business. So I am super grateful for my 13 years of business consulting, because it means that I am, even though to some creative writers, I'm still way behind on my years of writing, I'm way ahead in my years of business. And that is one of the reasons I was able to leave my job in 2011, was because I built a creative business. And that is and I'd also want to add here that business is possibly the most creative thing we can do, and by creating money and wealth in the world, we bring employment. I know you guys offer like editing services. We need money to make the world go round, and by creating wealth with our art, we can actually fund all the things that we want to do and create more in the world. So I'm very excited from creativity in a writing sense, but also from a business sense. I think they go together pretty well.
Yeah, I think that since 2016, that's when Joy and I really decided to go with the writing gig, make the career out of it, that sort of thing. But I think that both of us have been surprised at how the business and the spreadsheets and everything has become a creative venture, and how we've had to expand our idea of creativity from writing and painting and all of these talents that we see to mathematics and other things too. So that's been pretty fun.
Even learning things like we're doing a podcast right now, it's not like you're born knowing how to podcast or how to do a three-way interview. You guys make it harder on yourselves by having two co-hosts. But it's, these are we learn these technical skills. I think marketing has to be creative. Again, as authors, we have to do these types of things. And if we don't make it creative and fun, we're going to not do it. So, doing an interview like this, it's hopefully helpful to people, but also it's marketing and it's a creative time when we get to be together. So I think that reframing as much as possible as creative is the best way forward in life.
So true. I'm going to hop down to another question, because I feel like this fits really well here. And that is the one, have you ever faced a point in your as your creative endeavors grew to a financially successful business and a career, have you ever felt your creativity wane in that? Has the job part of it ever kind of tried to stomp on that creativity? And if so, then how do you kind of move past that?
Oh yeah, I would say quite regularly, but not for very long because I recognise it, and this is really important. I think we all get it. So whenever people are listening, it doesn't matter when you are listening to this, there will be some kind of political issue going on, and some kind of ecological issue going on, and it's very similar. It's like when things get too much, what should we do? We should probably turn off all our devices and go for a walk and go be in nature. Go look at there's a little wood near where I live, and the bird song. If it gets too much, I just go listen to the bird song and the little birds, and they're flitting around, and I'm like, okay, things aren't so bad or so difficult. And of course, it's not like you become a full-time writer and then everything just becomes super easy. It's just you guys know this. That's not the reality of anyone's life, and why would we want it to be? Life is all about challenge, but also I don't have any work-life balance whatsoever. Everything I do is about my career. If I go for a walk, I take pictures and put them on Instagram. If I go on a little holiday, I tend to write something about it or put it in a book, or I'm always thinking and doing. And we're recording this on an evening in the UK, and often I talk to Americans in my evening. So there do come times when I'm like, okay, I'm over this. There have been times I want to give up my podcast, over 10 years. Several times I've just said, right, I've had enough. I just want to be a writer. I just want to write books and not have to do all the other stuff. And then I have a very good friend, Orna Ross, who is wonderful. She's the founder of the Alliance of Independent Authors, and we do a lot of work together, and we tend to go up and down at different times. And she always says to me, you just take a week off, just step away from everything. I took Facebook off my phone a couple of years ago. I took Twitter off my phone this New Year's Day, because that's been my a big pull, and there's just too much going on. And so I do these practices to kind of preserve my creative self. I also schedule my creative time quite specifically. So I know, for example, that I'm 15,000 words into my next novel, but I know I can't get back to it until I've got my next nonfiction out the way, which is called Audio for Authors, which is about audiobooks and podcasting and voice technology and AI and quite technical things. So I know
we're very excited about that one.
We are.
Well, I think it will be very useful, but it's the headset I have to be, the mindset I have to be for that book. It's not the same as with my fiction. So my fiction has to wait. And part of me is annoyed about that, and I'm already late with what I wanted to do, but I know that that's the only way to preserve the space for that novel. And I've blocked out some time, and now I've just got to make sure I get there in time, basically. But sometimes you can't do everything all at once. You just have to kind of space things out.
That's something that I'm learning, and I'm trying to implement more this year. I'm learning from you.
Well, what I would also say is we're all in progress, right? We're all people in progress, and finally, when we die, we'll still be learning about death. I mean, we should be learning all our lifespan. And if you are in balance, it won't last very long, because nothing is in balance for very long. So don't beat yourself up about it. And if people listening, if you are struggling, you're like, oh, I wish I had more time. No one ever has enough time to do stuff. You just have to make choices.
So along this time, this over a decade of writing, do you feel like your creativity is in the same place and you're just using it differently, or that it has actually evolved into something different? Are there truths that you've learned about yourself, about your creativity, and how you use it? I hear a puppy.
I know, that's Bentley. He's we joke that he's become the grumpy old dog, get off my lawn kind of dog.
Oh no, that's very cool. No, well, I think what's changed, I do believe that we do all have this creativity, but obviously mine was quite buried, and many people listening might think that it's buried. Well, it might be buried, and the point is you kind of have to excavate that over time. And I still don't believe I have fully let mine run its to the end of its leash, bringing in the dog metaphor. I do think that we self-censor. There are things I want to write that I haven't written yet because I'm afraid of judgment. I think what I have learned is that there are cycles of creativity and you can't skip them. There's the period of, yay, this is amazing. This is a brilliant idea. There's the, oh, I hate this. Why am I bothering to do this? And then, there's just no point. There's the, even when you finish it, it's, I still hate this. I don't know what I'm going to do with this. And then there's also the, I don't think I can ever write anything again because I've written my heart out. And I feel that especially at the end of every novel. Nonfiction's different for me. At the end of a nonfiction book, I've got ideas for more nonfiction books. With my novels, I often think I can never write another book because I've just given everything to this book. But after a month or so, of rest, it comes back around again. So I understand, and I wrote a book called The Successful Author Mindset, which is probably my most popular nonfiction book, because it's true. And you asked about truth. That book is full of all the things that pretty much everybody feels about every stage of the creative process. And the tagline of the book is, you are not alone, because we all feel this way. We all feel all of this stuff. And that is just the creative process. So I think the main thing I've learned is to understand that we all feel this way, and that there's nothing weird about you if you feel any of these things. But the challenge is to just learn to create anyway and allow those things to happen, and just carry on, go back to the page.
So you had a mantra when you first started your creative journey. And will you share that saying with us? And then will you tell us, is this still a mantra that you feel is describes you today? Do you still use it today? Have you tweaked it at all?
So originally, before I could say it out loud, I wrote it down, which is, I am creative, I am an author. And I wrote that down a couple of years before I started the Creative Pen. And it's I started several websites and several other businesses before the Creative Pen. And it was because of that kind of mantra or affirmation that I guess I started a business called the Creative Pen. And everyone's like, oh, it's such a great name, and my name really is Pen. But it's so born for it, really. But it was definitely not something that came naturally. So I read a book called The Success Principles by Jack Canfield, which I would highly recommend to people. It's gone through its decade edition now. But that book really helped me in terms, and one of the first chapters is take 100% responsibility for your life. And that I needed to hear that, because I was in that poor me, look at my life, how have I ended up here? And it's like, well, you've ended up here because you've made the choices to end up here. So if you want to end up somewhere else, then decide where that is and then make the choices towards that. So I was like, well, where do I want to be? I guess I want to be creative and I want to be an author. And then his thing about affirmations, and this was around the time of The Secret and Law of Attraction, you write these things down in active sense. So I am creative, I am an author. But then the Law of Attraction, the big thing is also action. So it's not just, oh, I'm creative, I'm an author. You actually then have to sit down and write and act on that affirmation. So I do still have that. I record affirmations and then I listen to them. It's when I'm walking or something, and then I change them every at the moment it's about 6 or 7 minutes long, and I change things up and as things happen, because the power of the mind and intention, I still very much act upon that. What I have changed, and I actually wrote it down so I could read it. I've said, I am creative, I am an author. What is in my mind can be manifested in the world. And I wanted to tell you that because it's true, because look at my bookshelf. Okay, so, and look at the books you guys have put out. What is in your mind can be manifested in the world in the form of a book. Like, I haven't done an affirmation of, I have a Bentley or something. That's not something I care about anyway. That's not the type of thing I'm talking about. But the truth is, those books were in my mind, and then I wrote them down and went through the publishing process, and they are in the world, and you guys have read some of my books and my thoughts went into your head, and that's really cool. So that's why this is kind of miraculous in many ways that we can take what's in our minds, manifest them in the world in ebooks or print books or audiobooks or podcasts, and then other people can take bits of that and make something of them. So yeah, I still believe in the power of affirmations to change your mind, but you still have to take action.
I think it's really cool that you said that about the mind and bringing your thoughts out into something tangible. I have this really, and I think Joy too, we feel that we have this opportunity through books to leave a legacy for our children and for the people who read our books afterwards. And one of the cool things about structuring, we wrote a book called Finders Keepers, a practical approach to find and keep critique partners. It's about critique partners. And but we wrote it in an interview type style. So it actually says Joy, colon, and then there's, what she would say about a particular topic, and then May, colon. And so what I think that is really cool about that is that my children could read that book and they could probably hear my voice saying those words after I'm gone. And I think there's something really special about that. And
I hope you guys are going to record the audiobook as well. Then they can hear your voice.
That's on our goals for 2020. So that's why we're really excited about your book.
Yes. Pre-ordered, by the way.
Oh, thank you so much. No, I think, and what's interesting about audio is I really feel that this is another creative medium, and the three of us, by doing this interview, we've created something. It hasn't taken as long as a book, but it can potentially touch people in, vast places around the world, and we've created something that wouldn't have existed otherwise, with an energy that wouldn't have existed otherwise, and that to me is a creative process. And this to me is why I love podcasting, because it is possibly the most creative form of marketing, and brings this different energy. So I want us all, as people who love the written word, to think that it's not just about the written word anymore. It can be about the listened to word, the audio word, whether an audiobook or a podcast, and that we create in this way differently, but we can still touch people's lives. So my podcast has been downloaded in 222 countries, which is just mental. I mean, it's crazy, and over 4 million times now. And I'm like, well, okay, so I haven't sold that many books, and I have sold in 136 countries, which is still pretty good, but it's not 222. So what we've got to think is that our words can reach people in different ways, and they can be just as creative, producing something new in the world through audio as just with writing.
I think that that's one of the neatest things too, is because with podcasts, with social media, with all of these things, we've just shrunk our world so much more. Speaking from, I'm in the New Orleans area, she's in South Mississippi, you're in Bath, England. Okay, so we're all literally over the world, and we're sitting here having a conversation that's going to be heard by people all over the world. And just to have more of a global mindset and an understanding of the different cultures and communities and all of these things coming together, and that is super exciting to me. I love it.
It is indeed.
Mm-hmm. And speaking on the evolution of creativity, like socially, creativity and the idea of the concept has exploded. It's no longer this isolated thing that you do in a dark closet. It is. it's having conversations, and it's sharing your work, and it's getting critique. But Bentley, it's finding out how to make things better, and how to share your point of view and your perspective, so other people can open up and you see that perspective, consider it, and see if it's something that they want.
I think my dog stopped barking. I finally figured out how to mute it.
Darn baby.
I know, that was Romy, and I think that the mailman was out there.
It's all go on your show.
All right, May, you're going to ask the other questions.
So I do have one. I have another question about particularly self-identifying as a creative. So you made that mantra at the beginning, it seems, of your creative path. And did you did you just take that on, like, I am a creative, and just run with it, or was it later on that you fully embraced the idea that this is what you're doing? And some people say fake it till you make it, and I really hate that. that
Well,
term.
I don't think you can. Like, I have a bias for action. This is one of my good and bad personality types. So when I did make that affirmation, I absolutely understood that an affirmation is not enough, and so I immediately did take action and to turn that into reality. So I kind of when in terms of faking it, well, you can't really fake it in a way, because if you start actively doing it, then you're no longer faking it. But to say I am an author, obviously, to me, anyone can be a writer, but an author is someone with a book of some kind. Like the word, author is someone who has some kind of book. That is a broad definition these days. I guess it could be a screenplay or, some kind of written work that's finished. So even though I'd written journals for years and, lots of technical things, I didn't consider myself an author until I had written a book. And then, but, I think again, it's the process of continuing to create. So one of the things I like about having a podcast, about blogging, is that I don't, you're only as good as your last month. Really, you have to, if you're not keeping on creating, then it's going to stagnate. It's like a muscle, you have to keep using it. And so basically the moment a book is done, I'm into the next book. So it's a constant practice. It's not something like, oh, I've now achieved this. Ta-da! I mean, for some people it might be, because they might want to do something else with their life, and maybe I will at some point. But at the moment, this is still my everyday. It's like, okay, I'm an author today. What does that mean? Well, at the moment I'm doing edits on the audiobook, and I'm about to start recording the audiobook version. So that's my I am an author type of day at the moment. And then next month, it will be I am an author. That means I go to the cafe and I write my fiction, or I do my edits or whatever. So every day there's action that accompanies the idea of creativity, and you can't fake action. So I think that's the thing. If you're listening and you don't know what to do, well, seriously, book half an hour out of your calendar, go to a cafe with some paper and a pen, and spend that time writing something, and then you are actively being a writer. So I think that's all you really need to do every day, is take action on that.
Mhm.
What do you think are some of the biggest things that keep people from actually taking those steps?
I think fear is the biggest one. Fear of failure, fear that it's going to be crap, which it is going to be crap. That's why, as you guys know, you need, one, you need practice. People think that they can start writing and the first sentence they write from nothing is going to be brilliant, or the first book they write is brilliant. But the reality is, it's like anything. Would you sit down at a piano and expect to be able to play a concerto? No, you wouldn't. You'd need years of practice. So most writers need years of practice, and the million words, as we all talk about, and you need professionals to help you. I use professional editors, proofreaders, and then cover designers, and people to help make it better. But yeah, I think those are some of the things.
I found at the beginning of because it started long before 2016, and my want to do something creative and actually particularly write. So I thought at first that I was lazy. I thought I just was lazy, and there was a terrible characteristic to have. And to come to find out, after I dug a little bit deeper, it was fear. And then the fear manifested itself as procrastination and all of these things. And it was kind of a freeing thing to realize, oh, this is fear. It's not like this character flaw that I have.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think, most people will say they don't have time, but that masks all the other things, because again, you just have to prioritize how you spend your time. And if you actually examine your time, you will be spending it on something, and that's where you have to decide how you're going to spend your life. There's a quote: how you spend your day is how you spend your life. So if you're not making time, even if that's 15 minutes, or learn dictation. If you are like I interviewed Andrea Pearson on my podcast recently, who has homeschools her children and has a new baby, and she dictates because that's the only way she can get her writing done whilst dealing with her children. And her productivity is incredible because she's found a way. And she said her dictation is punctuated by I don't know the names of her kids, but Jimmy, stop that, and just sort of things that she's talking to her children at the same time as dictating, but the person who does her notes kind of just gets rid of those things. But it's interesting, that's an example I use. I'm child free, but we all choose how we spend our time. So when I had a day job, a very demanding day job, I knew I couldn't work at night time, so I used to, because I'd be too tired, so I would get up early at like 5 a.m. and write before going to work. And I gave up, I would basically go to bed earlier so I could get up earlier and write. And eventually I gave up a day at my job. I went to 4 days a week in order to have that extra day to focus on building my writing business, because I knew that's what I wanted to achieve and I had to make the time. So I think if people are listening and they're like, well, I can't do it because of this, you have to really dig down into the real reasons. And it's probably because you care so much. Like you say, a lot of the fear comes from, I really care about this. So I maybe if I never write my book, no one will ever criticize it. No one will ever know my innermost thoughts, and no one, nothing can ever fail because I haven't actually tried. So what I would say to people is you just have to do it anyway. I mean, seriously, does it matter if it doesn't work? Just do it anyway.
Exactly. I think that my mindset takes a little bit longer to catch up with my actions. So if I start um, with the action, and even though my mind is like, you're good, this is terrible, like this is not, you're not a creative, you're not an author, actually I am technically now because it's published, but but like if I do the actions, and it's not necessarily faking it, it's just doing the thing that that you want to do in your core, and then eventually my mind catches up to that, and it's like, oh yes, I can see that you are doing this, and that actions are being made, and yes, you are creative. Like it takes
Well
it a minute to
done.
get there.
And also, I mean, I think that's why the affirmation thing is good, because it kind of starts to change your mind before you really believe it. You can say, because at the moment, I'm an award nominated author, so, and I'm very proud of that. That's why it's in my bio. But I am not I'm an award winning entrepreneur, but I'm not an award winning thriller author. And I'm 45, so one of the things I would really like over my career is to win a thriller award or a horror award, or one of the decent awards out there, not a minor award but a major award. And this is I may never achieve that because it's not really a goal, because it's out of your control. Like you can't ever make that happen as such. But I still have an affirmation: I am an award winning author, even though I'm not, because it makes me feel, well, how do I become the type of author who wins an award? The only way I can do that is by becoming a better author. So how do I become a better author? I read more, I write more, I work with more editors, I get better at my craft. Once you set these affirmations, or about who you want to become, that will drive your action, because you have to do it to support that. Otherwise you're not. So even though I may never achieve that, although I believe I will, I still have to become that person to get there, and that's going to benefit me in lots and lots of ways. Another example, like this year, one of my affirmations is I am strong, because because of various health RSI issues, I got really weak, basically, and in pain. So now I am strong. I now have to physically, I'm lifting weights and doing things so that my body is strong and I can say I am strong. So this can benefit us in all kinds of ways. Hopefully that helps people.
And two of the things that I know you mentioned in some of your recent episodes that I think are so helpful. One was how you keep every 3 weeks, you kind of look back at your achievements in that time period. And I loved that you did 3 weeks. I think that that's really interesting. And then the other thing was something that you just touched on, was how you cannot create if you're not bringing in something creative and you're not reading, or whatever the case may be. So I think that those are two things that maybe might help some people.
Yeah, sure. So this last year was the first time I did this 3-week thing. So I use Things app. Everyone's got different apps that they like. I use Things. It's Mac only. It's on my phone and my MacBook. And basically, because I know that at the end of every year I do this round off for the podcast, which I'm so grateful for, because I wouldn't be doing it otherwise. So I was like, the year before, I was like, oh my God, what did I do this year? And you have to go through your year and like, this is a really long time, and I didn't want to have to look back at all my podcasts and try and figure out what I'd done. So this last year, 2019, I was like, okay, just every 3 weeks, because 3 weeks is enough to remember, but also you've achieved something. Like at the end of 1 week, it can be quite sad if you haven't got anything to write down. So I do a daily log now as well. So I have a daily log, but then also I do this 3-weekly kind of, and that will be, finished audiobook of audio for authors, or, it's actual big achievements. And then the other thing, the filling the creative well. So this is something that obviously, what's her name? Julia Cameron in the Writer's Way. That's the one, isn't it? The Artist's Way.
The Artist's Way, yeah.
Yeah, talks about filling the creative well. And this is like, if people feel they have writer's block, sometimes it can be that they haven't filled the well enough. So for me to write audio for authors, for example, I had to do a lot more research. I got a lot of knowledge about audio, but I needed to do more research, read more books, talk to people, listen to things, go to conventions, all of that. And then for fiction, all of my fiction is based on my travels and my research about places. Sense of place is a big thing for me. So we went to Amsterdam last year and Lisbon, and those trips go into my book. So you have to balance consumption and production, and the problem with many people is that they get that out of balance. So if you consume too much, say you're watching 25 hours of Netflix every week, and you're like, oh, I don't have time to write. Well, maybe cut down on the Netflix. But the other side is, if you are producing, if you're working 80 hours a week and you're like, oh, I've got writer's block, well, that's probably because your brain you've just put everything out and you need to fill it up again. So you have to keep this kind of consumption and production balance going in order to keep that creative flow happening, just in the same way as, I guess, physically we consume and produce. That's the way a physical body works. That's the way our brains work. It's all, it just works like that. And I think people, and that consumption can be reading books, it can be watching movies. So I was writing a scene about an ancient Egyptian tomb the other week, and I've read a lot of books on ancient Egypt, but I was like, I'm just going to go watch some mummy movies. So I went and watched some mummy movies with a notebook and just wrote down some things, good tropes. Oh yes, scarab beetles. Got to put in some scarab beetles. Just the things that, and that's not plagiarism. That is being inspired by other things, or reminding yourself of what these various tropes might be. So yeah, there's some ideas.
For someone who might look at your affirmations and try to set them for themselves and say, for example, I am strong, and yet they feel so weak, and the affirmation might actually make them a little despondent, a little depressed, like, because this is what you want to be, and here you feel so down here. Do you have any advice for anybody who might be like that?
Well, then I have to get a bit hardcore with you and the listeners, which is suck it up. Seriously, what do you want to do with your life? Who said this was going to be easy? And what's the point in having an affirmation which is what you already are? Because where's the challenge in that? We all set goals in some way, so yeah, if you feel despondent about where you are, like my I am strong thing came because I couldn't even, if you're on the video you can see, but I couldn't hold my arm straight above my head, and I couldn't hold a 1 kilo weight in my hand at this angle, and I was so upset with myself that I'd let my body get to this point where I was that weak, because I've looked back at my journals and I've been aware of this growing issue for a decade, really, and I was upset with myself to get to that point, because I see myself as I am a proactive person, and I do take control of my health. I've got a book called The Healthy Writer, for goodness sake. and I've made lots of good choices, but I've also made some choices that could be improved. But hey, aren't we all like that? Well, as I said, we're all works in progress. So you just have to suck it up and get on with it. And if you do manage to write a book, well, that won't be the end of it, because then you'll be like, oh right, I've written a book, and now what do I do now? Why aren't I selling books? Why aren't I making more money from my books? Why aren't I something? So I think this is the power of the human condition. We are never satisfied, even though we have moments of Zen. I'm so grateful for this moment that I am healthy and well and loved and whatever. Then the next moment it's like, right, must do this, that, and the other. And so yeah, if you're feeling like you can't, if you can't see the point, you just have to make little steps. So like the weights, that was in August, and in December I overhead lifted 20 kilos. So I was so proud of that, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is incredible. I can actually lift weight above my head and without pain, and I ended the year pain-free, and that was a really big deal for me. So we all have challenges in different areas. People listening might be like, well, that's pathetic, but that was my challenge for the end of last year. For me, look, to be honest, writing a book is not, I know I can write books. I've written like 33 books or something. I know how to write a book, but the challenge is then, well, what will challenge me for this book? And like wanting to win an award. Well, I have to get a lot better, and I have to submit to some awards, for example, rather than be too scared to do that. So we all have our challenges. You just have to suck it up and get on with it.
Thank you. Such great advice.
All right, so I think that we are closing in on the end of our time, and I'm going to head to our last question for you. So we know that you love to make predictions. We love your predictions. We've loved watching so many of your book industry predictions come to be, but we would love for you to share a prediction with us for the future of your creativity. How do you think your creativity will differ this year from last year? And then what are your hopes for your creativity further out, say to 2030, a whole other decade away?
Yeah, well, I think 1 year is never good enough, because most of us have already planned out the whole of this year, and I certainly have already. The books that I'm writing for this year are pretty much set in stone. So 1 year is not enough. What I have done this last year is move much more into audiobook narration. So I think and this is, this audiobook, I do think that in the next decade, I would like to create something just for audio. For example, I'm listening to, have you read World War Z by Max Brooks?
I have not read it yet.
Oh, it is a fantastic book. I mean, far superior to the movie. The Brad Pitt, awesome, but yeah. I mean, the book is
it is Brad Pitt.
Is genius. Yeah, exactly. But the book book is genius, and it's written, every single chapter is written from a different perspective, a different point of view, and which is incredibly difficult to write, as you guys know. It's got hundreds of different POVs. It's like it's a history, an oral history of the war again with the zombies. Brilliant book. I think there's a sequel coming, but the audiobook is even more special because every single chapter is narrated by a different voice. Now, this is, as an independent, this is way too expensive. This is practically impossible as an independent, because to do a project like that in audio. But what I see coming in the next decade, the 2020s, we will see AI voices. AI voices are already indistinguishable from humans, to the point where Google Duplex has to announce that it is an AI, so that people don't think it's a human. But I believe in the 2020s, we will have the tools to create things with those different types of voices in that way. So I'd really love to do an audio production with one of my books, and I've written some screenplays and stuff where we could more independently do this rather than really big budget creation. So that's something that I think will be coming. The rise of podcast fiction is really encouraging, but it's still expensive and time consuming to get all the actors to do all their things. And I human narrators are not going away, but I do see the costs for audio dropping, like us now. We're talking over Skype for free, and it's, podcasting is almost free money wise. Obviously the time it takes is different, but so I think audio creativity is a big pick for the decade. And I will definitely do that. And then personally, as I said, one of my goals, I'll be working towards, the prize type of idea. And I've been a first level judge on a number of awards. So I'm learning what makes an award-winning novel over time. And so I will be investing more in my author education, which I think is important. I'll be writing different kinds of books in order to move towards becoming a better crafts person, as well as a better business person.
So exciting. I can't wait to see what happens in the next decade and just watch your journey. And I know you're going to get that award. I have complete confidence.
Thank you. But wait, I'm going to hold you two up. So what's going to happen in your 2020s?
Oh.
You want to go first, Joy?
Okay, you're going to put me on the spot here. Let's see. So I should definitely have more books out. This decade we'll see my fantasy series come to light, which has kind of been that little heart project that I'm very excited to actually begin drafting this year. So
how many books in that series will be out in the 2020s?
Hopefully all of them, which I don't know how many that'll be though, because I will be sitting down to actually work through the outlining this summer. So it's already on the calendar.
Let's say all of them.
All of them
will be out.
All of them.
In 2020. Well done.
There we go. And then I love too, because you had a goal of, I think this was your last year goal of being a better publisher. And I feel like I'm just beginning into this, but I have my own publishing company, my press, Logos and Mythos Press. And so I want to be better at that side of it. And so I hope that will come with this decade as well.
Yeah, I have a few big things that I'm bringing out. Hopefully in August, I will be able to publish a poetry book, which is exciting. I will be querying the first book in a trilogy that is women's fiction. And if I don't hear back by the time I write all three, then I'm going to self-publish those and just kind of see where that leads me. And who knows? I just want to see what would happen. But I'm in revision process for the first book of that right now. And Joy, my wonderful critique partner, is waiting for we have a deadline where she's waiting for my book, and I have to just finish those edits.
Fantastic. Well, I think it's really good. And for people listening, it's easy to overestimate what we can achieve in a year and underestimate what we can achieve in a decade, as Tony Robbins and lots of people said. But, just to encourage you, back in 2010, 2010, we're speaking in January 2020. So January 2010, I was still working in my day job as an IT consultant. I did not have a novel out. I had one nonfiction. So, you know, my life is completely different now than it was a decade ago. So I think just consistent action really gets you somewhere. Like you say, we don't know where we're going to end up. I didn't know that I'd be doing this a decade on, still podcasting. But, you know, these are wonderful things. So I hope people listening will also aim to get more books out. Between us all, we'll get tons of books out in the next decade.
So I'm also doing some artwork too. So artwork and poetry going together. Going to put out some postcards with a friend of mine. So hopefully we'll have 4 of those series out. But for curiosity's sake, was writing always the thing? Because I write and then I also do the artwork and that sort of thing too. Was that always the thing for you, or were there other options?
Yes, I mean, I think creativity can be in so many different ways. Like, so my dad started out in sculpture and he's a printmaker now. He's also written a book. My brother's a photographer. My other brother is a fashion designer. My sister is a textile designer and an interior designer. So most of my family are kind of visual artists. So I wonder if I skewed to writing because I, you know, as a not to compete with all the visual artists in my family, but I do love taking photos, and I put them on my Instagram at JF Penn author. But I definitely skew towards the written word, and now the audio word as well. But I do think we can obviously create in so many mediums, and you're being creative in different ways. So there's no right answer. It's like whatever brings you alive. And I don't believe we should just, like, there's that book, The One Thing by Gary Keller, and I read that book and I was like, yes, I should do the one thing, and I was like, no, I can't, because that's not me.
The one thing,
How boring.
That scares me. Yeah, exactly. Like, what if I get tired of that one thing?
Exactly. So I'm like, no, I'll do the one thing at a time. Like, you had to finish your work, finish your postcards, finish your poetry book, finish your novel, whatever. There might be periods when you only do the one thing, but what a boring life. So let's embrace the multi-passionate creative.
Will you leave our listeners with a QWERTY challenge, is what we call it? Some little challenge that they can take away this week that they can do from what we've talked about.
Yes, well, I think from what we've talked about, you should write your affirmation for the 2020s. So to recap, it needs to be written as I am something. So mine might be I am an award-winning fiction author. So because I'm giving myself a wide open for the genre there.
We'll take them all.
It might be I can't pick which genre I'm going to aim for. But yes, so as I said, mine was originally I am creative, I am an author. So or it could be I have published this book or whatever. But so that's the goal. And this might sound simple if you know it already, write it down. But the important thing is write it down and put it somewhere you can see it. So I've got lots of things on my wall next to me. But it may take you listeners a long time to write that because you'll be scared. After you've written it, the next challenge is to say it out loud, preferably to another person. And this will be very hard. I think I spent about 6 months not able to speak mine. So don't worry if you can't say it out loud. Write it down. Step 1, think about it. Step 2, write it down. Step 3, speak it out loud or email it to the ladies, and they will keep you accountable. And we'll see you in 2030 when we can feedback on what we said. But I think that's probably enough of a challenge. What do you think?
Yes, I absolutely do. That's wonderful. I'm going to do it myself because I've never really done affirmations before, but I'm very intrigued, and we can give it a try for 2020. So we can book you for 2030, right? Like we can just put that on the calendar.
Well, hey, I didn't know I'd still be podcasting a decade later, but here I am, heading for episode 500 on my show.
Wow.
There you go. If people want another podcast, the Creative Pen podcast, Pen with a double N, come on over. And also thecreativepen.com, come and get my author blueprint, which is a free resource. And any questions, best place is Twitter at thecreativepen with a double N.
Absolutely. And if you enjoy books and if you enjoy travel, then go visit Joanna at her other podcast for is Books and Travel. And you can find that on any of the podcasts. And I'm sure that there are links to in all of your social media presence. And we will put that in the show notes, guys. So you will be able to just click and go straight to her. And if you have not heard of Joanna Penn, then now is the time. You just download all of those and go take a wonderful walk and listen to everyone, because there's so much good stuff going on there.
Oh, well, thanks so much for having me. It was great to be on the show.
Thank you so much for being with us.
So everybody just have a wonderful creative week and go make something.
Bye.
Thanks for listening until the end.
Seriously, you're a trooper.
Do you think QWERTY Writing Life is the bomb?
May, you just said the bomb.
Don't you censor me.
If you think QWERTY Writing Life rocks ice for real,
oh my word,
please rate, review, and share us with others.
If you have questions about this week's episode or want to start a conversation, you can reach us by visiting QWERTYWritingLife.podbean.com.
We'll be back next week with more candid chats for you.